Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast Markets with Shawn Hackett. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. Axon Tire's got a couple great gifts to give away to the loyal listeners of the Moving Iron Podcast. One is they ran out of deerskin gloves. Shawn said to switch over to a camouflage Alliance Tire hat that you can wear.
I'm wearing them right now. See, you
Yeah,
can't tell. See,
they're nice. Those really almost look like real hands. Look at that. Camouflage gloves. Can't even see the gloves. All right. So if you want one of those, if you want the Alliance baseball cap, send a email to marketing@axontire.com and they'll send one to you in the mail. Also, if you want $50 off of your registration to the Moving Iron Summit, send an email to me at MovingIronPodcast@MovingIronPodcast.com. And the nice people over at Axon Tire are going to take care of that $50 for you. So interested in those two things, send an email to marketing@axontire.com for the hat. Send me an email at MovingIronPodcast@MovingIronPodcast.com for the $50 discount for everyone to come, for the first 150 people that come to the Moving Iron Summits. Check that out. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 for all your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. No matter how you buy your ag equipment, whether it's from a dealer, an auction, or a private party, AgDirect can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com. Tractor Zoom has access to over $20 billion in heavy equipment sales data. Tractor Zoom's Iron Comps is the industry's trusted solution for transparent equipment values and auctionable pricing insights. And finally, this podcast is brought to you by Anvil AppWorks. Their Dealer Connect CRMI app with integrated inventory management is an affordable Salesforce-based solution for your dealership. Create a connected customer experience and transform how you work today. Shawn is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida. And Shawn is nice enough to come on and talk about what's happening in the marketplace here. So, Shawn, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm getting ready to go to South Dakota next week for 3 meetings in a row, and then make a quick run to Indiana to do one, and then I'm home for
World
the rest
traveler, Shawn Hackett.
Never been busier on the speaker circuit in my entire career. It's been really crazy.
I can't imagine why. There's nothing going on. I can't imagine why anybody would want to hear what you had to say, Shawn.
But I'm off for December at least, and then January just crazy booked again. But I'm grateful, thankful that people are interested enough in agriculture and weather that I get a chance and opportunity to speak and talk about some things that I obviously think are very important to what's going on with food production and and how important that's going to be going forward. So very fortunate to be in a position to do it.
Yeah.
So
it's been a 2021 and 2022 have been a very news impactful years anyway. And I guess as you're looking at, we are headed into Thanksgiving this week, and we got all that stuff going on. We've had, the poultry side of the business has had some troubles with avian flu. And that happens every year. It's one of those things that we see pop up. But this year seems to be the year that it just won't go away, I guess. So reading the news here, Shawn. So I guess as you're looking at the poultry industry right now, what are some of your thoughts there, and how do you see that influencing the price of turkey this week going into Thanksgiving?
Well, it's all protein, right? I mean, the whole thing is whether it's white meat, dark meat, red meat, it's all protein. So, there's X amount of protein out there, and everyone can choose if and when they're going to consume such meat protein. And if there's less of the chicken protein and they still want to consume protein, they're going to have to go, get it from somewhere else, whether it's pork or it's, beef or it's something else. So, it just keeps the overall meat protein supply side of the equation tight. At the same time, there's tremendous stress for consumer demand based upon the tough financial conditions that are starting to crimp the demand side factor. So we have kind of a battle of bullish supply, bearish demand meeting head on. And it's a question of which one just gets the upper hand or not. My best guess is right now the demand issue is going to catch up with cattle and knock it down into the first quarter. I think if China's demand comes in like it has for pork, I think that will be enough to create enough demand to override and win out, creating some higher hog prices here. Obviously chicken is a cash market, but anyone looking at the price of turkeys knows they've been up pretty strongly this year. So,
yep. Yeah, I've noticed that. There's about everything that you go look at the grocery store anymore. I got something the other day. I remember what it was. It was like 5 things, and it wasn't like I got 5 extravagant cuts of meat and those kind. But it was like $60, and I was like, "Holy crap!"
yeah,
My wife obviously does most of the grocery shopping, so I was like, "Man, this used to cost $25, but
it's
that's the world we live in now, right?"
It is, and for now,
Mhm.
for now, but remember, animal feeding units everywhere in the world are down because of drought, because of disease. In fact, I don't have an exact number, but if I look at all the numbers around the world and look at how much herd liquidations occurred in China, in Europe, in the U.S., we might be looking at some of the smallest overall animal feeding units, in probably 4 or 5 years. So that means whenever demand picks up a little bit, and it doesn't have to pick up a lot when you have that kind of constricted supply, but if it just picks up a little bit, the reaction to prices in the livestock sector are going to be pretty exciting. And that's what I think one of the big stories for 23 is going to be, that once we get through this hard down phase in demand and the Fed says, we're done, or whatever they're going to, and we start getting some optimism back for demand, the upside potential for livestock prices in 23, could be pretty exciting, and probably more exciting than many are suggesting. But on the flip side, if you think this through, it means feed demand is going to be low. There's less cattle and less hogs and less chickens to feed, not only here, but elsewhere. That means there's just less need for feed, at least for the first half of the year. So, that may temper a little bit grain prices, feed prices. Now, of course, weather always rules, right? I mean, it doesn't mean there's no demand. And if the 1 in 100 year Gleisberg cycle drought kicks in 23 because of Hurricane Tonga's delay, if it turns out that Hurricane Tonga and the Mariana Islands underwater eruption delay El Nino's arrival, then even lower demand won't stop the price from grains going higher. So, so to me, that's the big story for grains is, what's that weather going to be? Are we going to get the El Nino like we would expect to see it, and we're still going to stick with that forecast for now, or are we going to get a delay and we're going to get the 1 in 100 drought? Obviously, if it's the 1 in 100 year drought, Casey, then who knows where grain prices are going to go? But they're going to go where we probably, kind of like Star Trek, we're going to go where grain prices have not gone before.
Look at you.
Sorry, I had to do it.
Oh man, Shawn,
the prime directive.
Prime directive. All right. So we got this. Okay, so we got the stuff going on. We got the feed thing that we've talking about. As long as this drought continues to stay in place, and you've talked about this, what you see in that. So you put a report out not too long ago that was talking about Western United States and California precipitation, what you might see happening there, and what that looks like. Give me the brief synopsis of that and what you see happening there.
We did analysis going back 150 years for Western U.S. That means if you just draw a line straight down the U.S. west, so Nebraska is west, okay, and we really wanted to focus on California as well, because obviously they're so important to feed production and that sort of thing, and food and vegetables and that sort of thing. And we went through analysis of the West goes through long periods of drought conditions and long periods of wet conditions. And we went over what really are the primary drivers for that. And what it was an hour long podcast. So I don't want anyone to think that we're just giving a very overall synopsis, but the PDO, which is the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and the AMO, which is the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, what phases those are in, and how they are in sync with each other really determine the overall long-term weather patterns. And then the short-term patterns are modulated by El Nino, La Nina. So we have been in a negative PDO since 2000. We've been in a positive AMO, meaning cold Pacific, warm Atlantic, for the last 20 years. If you look at long-term precipitation patterns for the West, we've been in an overall below normal precipitation pattern. and in some cases, extremely below normal precipitation pattern. This is normal when you have a negative PDO and positive, and we showed examples of past times where we've had that sync between those two. What we're believing is going to take place is the historical sea surface temperature cycles. The PDO and AMO are not in alignment. They're in different phases, but they pretty much go up, warm up and cool down in 40-year cycles. 2025, we expect the AMO to go into the negative phase, which means that the PDO is going to be negative and the AMO is going to be negative. And when that happens, Western precipitation reverts back to a more normal pattern. Not above normal, but you get to back to normal compared to what we've seen in the last 15, 20 years. That will look like phenomenal. It'll be like great. So I guess the point I was trying to make with this this particular study was that we probably, obviously we have a few more years of drought to go, meaning we're still going to be in a drier pattern into 25. And it could get considerably worse because we happen to be aligned with the Gleisberg cycle right now. And usually trends end in a bang. Usually the drought cycle ends with an epic drought and then ends. So I guess the bad news is we're not quite there yet for West US and California. But the good news is once we get past 2025, we should enter a 10-year period of normal precipitation. And then the way the cycle works is the PDO is going to go positive against a negative AMO, and that actually creates above normal precipitation for Western United States. So the bad news is we're not quite there yet. Brace for worse. The good news is the long-term picture actually looks like having the water situation out west is going to get progressively better after 2025. So I think in the long run, given that most people in agriculture who are planning are looking at the longer term, I think that's actually really good news that this extended period of below normal precipitation that is creating all kinds of angst is going to actually ease, but we have one more zinger to go before we get there.
Right on. And I think you've talked about that quite a bit as to what that looks like. So now let's talk about the other sides, go across the pond here and talk what's happened over in Europe from a weather perspective. You'd mentioned, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago on a podcast about that, the way Europe was sitting right now with natural gas, they'd have, their stocks are full, almost 100%. We have the ability to send stuff over there, but there's just not a lot of places to put it right now. The first half of winter over there you thought would be a little tougher than the second half, but the second half would be significantly more mild than what is anticipated. And I've heard about 3 or 4 other people now come on and talk about that same thing. So looking at the natural gas outlook that we see right now, Shawn, how do you think that's going to affect the overall fertilizer supply and price right now moving into the spring?
I think the most important thing about the winter is the length. Mm-hmm. We can have extreme cold winter, but if it's a short winter, they're still going to be fine. The problem is if you had a repeat of last year, they would run out natural gas. We simply can't supply enough to override the gap of Russia not, sending them the typical supplies through the pipeline. So the good news is our forecast is very, very clear that we're going to have a short winter, early spring, meaning that the winter ends, late February, and we starting to see spring-like conditions potentially even by the end of February, early March, and that really saves the day for Europe. Really saves the day to cut out almost a month of what could have been winter, and then almost 2 months of it. If it was a late winter like last year, it really saves them from. And so we're very, very confident in a short winter. They are going to have some cold weather. This is not going to be, this is just going to be a warm. We're going to have some plenty of cold weather, but I don't see the extreme polar vortex, sudden stratospheric warming event kind of stuff where you get, minus 35. I don't think it's cold, polar cold, but not frigid cold. And so with that forecast, what that says to me is that to the extent that fertilizer prices are going to fall, natural gas prices, at least for nitrogen-based fertilizer, I think, and fertilizer prices have already peaked and come down already to some extent. I think the fertilizer price is going to be lower come the springtime. There's been so much fear over running out of natural gas, and I just think, and remember, people have had 6 months to prepare for running out of fertilizer too. And so everyone and every fertilizer company is stocked up and did what they had to do. I think I think we're going to be fine for this particular. It doesn't mean that at some point in the future, we can't get back into having trouble again. But I don't think the fertilizer thing is something to worry about. At this point, I think we actually have already seen the worst case scenario play out in prices, and we're actually on the way down, and and that sort of thing. So, and remember, if this is the year for the Gleisberg cycle drought, usually that means that fertilizer consumption goes down, because if you're so dry, you don't apply as much fertilizer just because there's no moisture to just so yeah. And so overall, I just think, I wouldn't panic on fertilizer prices. I know everyone is pretty panicky, but I think when we get to March, I think the fertilizer price is going to be now back to where it was, but certainly much more economical than what it has been. So.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Last thing, get your thoughts on this. I think it was last week, Thursday, I believe. I think when we were talking about the effects of the underwater volcano, we brought up the that the Black Sea corridor had been agreed upon until about February timeframe, and that was going to open up more cargoes of grain to leave Ukraine and Russia all throughout the Black Sea. I guess as you're looking at that scenario now, and with those things coming together like that, what are your thoughts for because like you said, this is the best time to stock up on grain right now coming out of that area, especially with Ukraine and Russia both having bumper crops. Russia more importantly have a way more available stocks than anyone else in the world does when it comes to wheat. So I guess when you're looking at that, you start looking at North Africa and Asia, and how India's talking about that their small grain crops are off to about 15% better head start than they were this time last year. Looking at all that information, Shawn, how fast do you think that will take to get those grains spread out, and then also what effect do you see that having on the wheat market right now?
Well, I mean, the fact that we're going to continue to keep some grain flowing. I remember originally when Russia went into February, the consensus was that there would be no way to see any shipments out of there for at least a year.
Right.
And it could be offline for 2 years. And the fact that, and nobody expected or believed that we would be having grain coming out of there for the last 3 months. I mean, that was a complete shock to the system. And the fact that it was extended means that it just takes the pinch off of this whole geopolitical event, meaning that maybe it's not perfect. Yes, production is down. Yes, the exports are not what they could be, but there is grain coming out versus the idea that nothing was going to come out. So it takes the edge off of that extreme scarcity issue. And that doesn't mean that that having all this problem in Ukraine is great, or that it doesn't have long-term ramifications. It just means for right now, so long as that grain is flowing to some extent, that takes the pinch off. If we have a El Nino year and we have big grain production in South America, especially and more importantly, Brazil, and we have big grain production here, that means more supply coming in on top of, the Russia equation to some extent being neutralized for a little while. So, that's why I can still get back to the quintessential determination. Is this the El Nino year or not? Because if it is, we would expect important lows in grain markets to be late spring into early fall, when we price all of that in. If it's not, then you're going to price in a low sometime in the first quarter, because you're going to get the big crops out of South America. Of course, this grain core deal is going to keep, supplies coming out. But if all of a sudden, if we make the determination that this is potentially, the drought, and it shows up that we have an early spring, but there's no rain coming, and all of a sudden we're getting into June and we have the entire US in red, then all bets are off. So that's really still comes down to what we're really spending our next 3 months doing, Casey, is looking at every variable, every trend that we know look at to try to make this determination as quickly as possible. Because that really is a determination as to how all this plays out. For right now, though, the grain corridor deal extending and still very good weather in Brazil says for now there's not much to worry about in the grain markets, other than Argentina, which we've been talking about for some time. We do believe can create a little bit of consternation here in December before the big crop potential in Brazil starts to override that. So that's where we're at, and but what I would say is, with the wheat market down here, if you look at SRW wheat, down at around $8, it's a pretty, if I'm a cash buyer of that kind of wheat, I think there's a good value here, Casey. Still a lot of risks that can come out that we don't know. I just think that, if you're looking at where we were at 14, how bullish everybody was, and now where we are at 8 and how bearish everybody is, if I'm a cash buyer, this is the time you're supposed to be putting some cash orders in and getting some coverage. And I think that's what I would be doing on the cash side of the wheat market right now. So,
okay. All right, Shawn, good stuff as usual. Folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what it is you're doing on Hackett Financial. What's the best way to do that?
Our website is Hackett, Hackett, advisors.com. Lots of information about our weather algorithms, capital flows, some of our interviews on market to market and such, that people can get a good idea of what we do, how we do it, to see if we could be of value to your listeners.
Right on. Well, Shawn, I appreciate you being on the podcast, and happy Thanksgiving, man.
You too, Casey. It's a blessing to be on your show.
I appreciate that. All right, I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can send me an email at, if you want to go there, you guys want to look me up at Moving Iron LLC. That's where you can find me at. And then if you want to go to LinkedIn, it's Moving Iron Podcast, and check out the video version of this on the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel, which is called the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. It's clever. I know you guys are shocked by my creativity there. So check that out. And then if you want to go to MovingIronLLC.com, you can find everything Moving Iron related, everything, all the information about anything going on there. You want to see what Shawn looks like. If you don't go to the video side of it, you can check that out too. So Shawn, I
need a shave. That's what I need.
I couldn't do this without guests like you on here, man. So I really appreciate that. I'm thankful that you're on here a couple times a week talking about what's going on in the marketplace.
It's a blast. Sounds good. Thanks, Casey.
Buddy. So with that, Casey Seymour, Shawn Hackett. It's going to be smart, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard work.